Good evening, everyone. A very warm welcome to each one of you. I'm Khushi Malhotra, Operations Manager at Ministry of Security, and it's my absolute pleasure to greet you all at today's webinar on effortless compliance, mastering cross-border data transfer. So we are excited to have you with us, and I'm even more thrilled to introduce our speakers, Dr. Preeti Jaggi and Shreya Jain. So, Dr. Preeti Jaggi is an experienced data protection officer with a proven history of developing and implementing data protection policies to ensure smooth regulatory compliance. She has successfully led GDPR, CCPA, and other privacy law implementation across APAC and other regions for well known companies like Meta and Deloitte. Joining here, we have Shreya Jain, who is a data privacy consultant and ISO 27001 certified professional. With her wide experience in helping startups and businesses navigate the global data protection laws, she will bring valuable insights to this session. So, I would like to welcome Preeti and Shreya. So, throughout the session, feel free to share any questions or thought you have in the comment section, and we are here to ensure you have an engaging and an enriching experience. So, let's dive into the today's sessions.
Thank you so much, Khushi, for this wonderful introduction. I'm really excited to be here today. And thank you so much, Preeti, for joining us. I'm excited to talk about the very important topic, cross border data transfer, with you. And I hope all the audience would feel that, we have discussed very important questions and we have solved a few challenges that they may face in relation to cross border data transfer. Over to you, Preeti.
Thank you, both of you. Thank you for such a warm welcome. And I do hope to throw some light at the topic mentioned and learn as well as from all the professionals across our screens. So let's start with the topic itself. Um, as we all know that in today's interconnected world, why this cross-border data transfer plays an important role in driving it is driving the digital global economy. It helps in facilitating the digital trade and seamlessly transferring that data, personal data across the borders. Now, despite having the benefits of the cross-border data transfer, it still raises a legitimate concerns regarding the protection of individual privacy, regarding the data security, and even with the potential misuse of the personal data. Now, let's work together on the this subject and understand from a closer lens. So, a quick introduction: cross-border data transfer, as the name itself suggests, it refers to the transfer of personal data from one country to another. Now, this is often done for processing, storage, or any other business purposes. Now, this involves, now there are two separate aspects to it. This also involves the transferring of data between organizations from one country to another, or it can be within the single organization with the multiple operations in different countries. Let's take an example to understand the concept of a cross-border data transfer. Let's say a US-based company named Tech Corp. Now, this has a global customer base which operates both in US as well as in EU. Tech Corp uses the US cloud-based CRM solution, for example, to store the process or the process the customer data. Now, three things are happening in the single example, which shows the importance to understand the cross-border transfer of data. One is the data collection, which is happening in this example. Second is your data transfer, and third is your data processing. Data collection, now Tech Corp collects the data of EU customers and could be like name, email addresses, their purchase history, and then there is a data transfer. Tech Corp transfers the EU customer database to US for their processing, analysis, or any kind of a profiling. And now there is a processing which is happening at US. Now the reason behind could be there any marketing, any customer support services. Now this here we foresee, in this particular example, we foresee the need to understand the cross-border data transfer. I can club it into three categories, like needs to understand the data sovereignty, need to understand the data security, and the compliance. A quick two-liner, what could be the data sovereignty? any different countries, we have a various data protection laws and regulations. For example, in this example, let's say EU and US we are talking about. So EU has a GDPR, which is a comprehensive data protection law. And US laws are like either the more sector specific laws are there or the state specific laws are there. So sector specific can be like HIPAA for healthcare. There could be GLPA, the Leachability Act for financial institution, COPA, which is for the children's online privacy, etc. And the state specific could be your CPRA now for California, Virginia Consumer Data Protection Act, Colorado Data Protection Act. So this is how the data sovereignty, understanding the entire ecosystem of the sender as well as destination country. Data security, yes, of course. I think ensuring the data security to during the transfer, during the processing is a prime focal point here. And compliance, we are navigating through all the regulatory frameworks to make ensure that we are having compliant towards this kind of a flow. So we can definitely move to the next slide, please. Thank you so much. Identifying the need for the data transfer. Now, the same example which we just took, it identifies the need of data transfer compliance, which we can club into two main part here. One is identifying the data types, and second is your assessment of a reason. Now, identifying the data types are basically in the same example. Let's take it the Tech Corp example. We the data transfer which is happening there between from EU to US is could be the name, email address, or a purchase history of a customer. Now, along with the data type identification, I believe there is a very important part to understand that what is the data size, what could be the frequency for which the data will be transferred. And now the second is the assessment of a reason, which basically means the importance to understand that why this data is getting transferred. The same example, now the tech corp has a purpose for which the data is getting transferred from US to EU, from EU to US, which is to utilize that US based CRM tool. Why? To for the marketing purposes or for the customer support purposes. So this is something, yeah, thanks for that. So yes, we can move to the next slide, please. All right, we have a quiz here. So Shreya, would you like to read out the quiz?
Yes. So basically, you have 15 seconds now. The quiz question number one. According to the GDPR, when does an organization need to take action to legitimize cross border data transfers of personal data? Option A, when the data is routed through another jurisdiction, whether the other jurisdiction is in or outside the European Union. Option B, when the data is transferred from one jurisdiction within the European Union to another jurisdiction within the European Union. Option C, when the data is transferred from a jurisdiction outside the EU to a member state of the EU. Option D, when the data is transferred from a jurisdiction in the EU to a third country which is not deemed adequate. You have 20 seconds. Try to answer these questions. After that, Preeti will definitely give you answer and with justification. Time starts now. Time's up. Preeti, would you like to answer?
Yes, definitely. I'm sorry, I was not looking at the timer. So thanks for that, Shreya. The correct answer, I cannot see the comments, but if anybody have written the correct answer, the answer is on point D. When the data is transferred from a jurisdiction in the European Union to a third country which is not deemed adequate. So the main idea behind this question is that when an organization needs to an action to legitimize a cross-border data transfer, when the data is transferred from jurisdiction in the EU to third country which is not deemed to be adequate, a controller or a processor may transfer the personal data to a third country or international organization only if the particular destination country has an appropriate safeguard. So this is something which is, I think, in the Article 46 will be covering, and this is the correct answer. Yeah.
So you mean to say that there are different patterns of transfer. So it's EU to
Yes.
EU, and it's EU to cross border, EU to adequately safeguard the countries which have adequate safeguards for the protection of data, and other countries. So these many transfers we have to talk about when we talk about cross border data transfers, right?
Absolutely, you are right on the spot here, Shreya. So I think our coming slides, I will be speaking a bit about SCCs, something about the BCRs, various certificate mechanism. So this is all the safe harbor, which is though currently not in there, but I think yes, during the cross border data transfer can happen, and there are many mechanisms to do that. So, okay, yeah, so the next slide is talks about obtaining the data principal or data subject consent. Now, even before we initiate the cross-border transfer, there are some very fundamentals which is important and mandatory, and the right practice in the data protection law to obtain the lawful consent from the data principal or data subject. So data principal is something with which our DPDP Act talks about, and data subject is something which GDPR and the EU jurisdiction, this is the verbiage which they are using. Now, however, before obtaining the consent of a data subject or a data principal, there is a requirement to ensure that the privacy notices are in place, which covers all the important key points to obtain that lawful consent. Now, how the consent can be lawful? It should be covering lot of aspects, like the consent should be specific, it should be it should be transparent, it should be out of free will, it should be properly informed, it should be unambiguous, and there should be opt-in mechanism or an affirmative action which needs to be taken place from the data subject or data principal. There should be the record keeping. So there is lot of options, which is lot of important part which has been provided by the law to make any consent as a lawful. So if you want, I can just quickly give a little more details here. For example, like the tips which you have mentioned here, the simple, clear consent forms, the key details of the form. I believe apart from the consent to be specific, transparent, it is very important that the data subject should also able to amend or revoke the consent. For example, today I'm able to give a consent for a particular processing, and now maybe after some time, if I do not want that processing to happen, I don't want it to. I wanted to revoke my consent. And again, how this is possible? So there should be a bifurcation between the two types of consents. One is your mandatory consent, and one is your optional consent. So mandatory consent is something where data subject or data principal have to give a consent, without which the processing of the data may not happen. For example, a quick example, if while opening a bank account, if the KYC process is a mandatory for us, if me as a customer do not give a consent, then the bank account may not open. So this is something which is mandatory. Now, the optional consent is something where maybe for any analytical purposes, maybe for any marketing, sales purposes, I do not want it to give my consent. So this kind of a consent is very important, and the data principal should able to revoke to change the consent. Yeah, we can move to the next
Yes,
slide, please.
yes.
Yeah,
I have one question here. So when
please.
we
Yeah.
talk about consent, any other form of consents are available, or is there any specific criteria or form only, or how? So we see multiple times there are tick marks also. Would that also be count as consent? So what do you have to say about it?
You are absolutely correct. There is a lot of changes which is required for an organization end. So any predefined tick marks, check boxes, anything which is already highlighted from the data principal end is not considered to be uh, predefined check boxes, check marks is not a consent. A consent is when me as a data subject is actually doing that opt-in, or there is an affirmative action which I am taking across. So this is something, like I've seen many times a lot of websites, lot of other, it is already all the cookies, like whether it's the necessary cookies, promotional cookies, analytical cookies, everything is on the yes. So this is not the right way to do the consent. It should be me as a user, or you as a user. We should have that right to take a decision that whether we wanted to have these kind of analytics run through our profiles or not. So yes, you have a point, Shreya, that these kind of consent is not, because this is not transparent. This is not informed. I need to know that where I'm, what sort of processing for which I'm giving a consent to.
Right.
Hope it
Last
answers
question
the
on this
question.
slide. No,
Yes.
it does definitely. So, without consent, any company cannot transfer my data cross border, is what we are saying. It's not possible.
No, consent is one of the way, but there are other legitimate ways for which the cross border data can be transferred. One is
Right.
your contractual. Yeah.
Yes. Please,
Yeah, okay.
please.
One is your contractual, obligations. If I have signed some contract, or maybe I have signed, if I purchase something, maybe e-commerce website, I'm purchasing it some from XYZ country back to India. So I am already giving I'm, giving my. This is a kind of a contract. I'm paying to the merchant, and that product needs to be delivered to my house. So this kind of is a contractual, or any exporter or importer when they sign up their contracts. So it is not necessary that they still requires to have a predefined consent, but there is a proper agreement. So anything which is, so consent has a very important value, especially from the DPDPA perspective, because we give a lot of value towards that customer or the consumer, or a data principal on other hand should have a decision power to think, to evaluate, and whether they are agreeing to that processing or not. But there are other ways also for which the organization may transfer such kind of a data.
Thank you so much, Preeti. I just wanted to convey to the audience that there are other ways also. Consent is one such manner.
No problem. No problem at all. All right. So yes, we were talking about movement of data from one country to another. So approved countries and the territories. Now, what are these approved countries and territories? They are those jurisdiction that have already demonstrated a commitment to protect the individual privacy right, to ensure the secure handling of personal data. So it is very essential to consult your own DPAs, which is your data protection authorities, and the legal companies or the legal framework. One was to get up-to-date information on what are the approved list of countries and territories. So, for example, as in our current scenario, there the from the DPDPA perspective, we do have a transfer of data which is across the globe, not without any except to the restricted countries. Now, this list of restricted countries will be, I believe, will be added up in the rules, which will be, I hope, by October we should be getting the rules. I think it is most everybody's well awaiting on that part. So, additionally, now, for example, additionally, if there are certain unapproved countries, now there are other alternative data transfer mechanism which should be used to ensure that we are compliant or the sender is compliant with the data protection regulation. Now, some of these regulations, I think I can definitely discuss in the next slide, which is at little more detail. Unless you have any other questions here in this slide. Yep. So we can move to the next slide then.
Sure, I'll change.
Sure. Yes, thank you. So this is from, I'm coming from the continuity of the previous slide here. So some of the mechanism which is used for ensuring the adequate safeguard for the cross-border data transfer is, it include a cusp of data protection measures and the legal team to guide on the measures. So it is always, the involvement of the data protection measures and the legal team. One could be your standard contractual clauses. So this is a pre-approved clause. So SCC, we call it in a short form SCC. These are the pre-approved contract between the data exporter or importer, which ensures the data protection compliance. Then we have a BCR, which is your binding contract rules. This is internally enforced data protection policy which applies to the multinational corporation. It is mostly the intra-organizational. There are various certificate mechanism, your ISO 27001, your NIST certification, to demonstrate that there is an adequate data protection at the destination country. There are other DPAs, the data protection agreements we can put in place between the countries to ensure that we have a adequate data protection, transference, processing, and the security measure which we wanted to take place. There are many other data transfer agreements. There could be the group intra-group agreements. There could be the trusted third-party services also, where we can use the sender country can use the third-party services, and to ensure that the data transfers through a data protected and in compliant manner. So there are many ways, the other ways through which we can have this kind of a transfer of a data. But the technical safeguard is something which is really, I do believe that the act, whether it is a GDPR or DPDPA act, do talk about that there should be an appropriate technical and the organizational measures for the data security. Now, what are these kind of a technical measures? It could be your having your SSL or TSL, using the SFTP, the Secure File Transfer Protocol for data transferring, assessing the data transfer or processing through VPNs, having the cloud security gateways. At the org level, there must be the DLP tools to monitor any unauthorized transfer of files or data to outside domains. So there are many such technical safeguards which can be used to ensure that there is a safeguard of the data transference and protection which is happening during the transference of such data.
Right. Just to clarify for the audience, so when we transfer data to the countries which has adequate safeguards for data protection, right? So, for example, European Union, when it transfers the data to Japan, so Japan is it comes under the list of countries which has adequate safeguards for data protection, right? So while transferring the data, do they require this SCC, or is it uh, they can straight away transfer the data because they know that the adequacy protection, like the protection has been taken care of?
Well, Shreya, as I just shared in a minute before, that when we say the educate or approved country or the educate safeguard, it means that they have demonstrated the commitment to protect the privacy right, to ensure the secure handling. But having said that, these are the ways to have the data transferred. And for example, though Japan, as you mentioned in your example, the Japan definitely is considered into in the educate with the educate safeguard. But how we are able to demonstrate that? This is only possible when we have our data protection agreement, we have our contracts, or we have our intra-group, depending upon what kind of a transference of a data we are having, whether it is from organization to third party, or whether it is within the organization. Maybe the EU has the parent company, and there is one group company which is in Japan for processing, so they can use the BCR. So though there is an advocate safeguard which is lined up there in the destination country, but these are the mechanism or the measures through which you can establish, you can prove that this is how we are considering Japan or XYZ destination country to be educate enough to secure the data safeguards and to secure with all the educate safeguards and the organizational technical measures which they have to take. So I think, for example, okay, I'll give another example here. This is not with the cross border, but this is something which is with the DPDP Act. If you see the DPDP Act, the entire obligations is on the data fiduciaries or your significant data fiduciaries. What about the processors? So GDPR does talk about the obligation of the processors, but DPDP Act does not. So does it mean that we can say that okay, the processor does not have any obligation? They can they process the data as they may like. But in that circumstances, what we need to take assistance is of the contracts. So the contractual agreement or the DPAs between the data fiduciaries and the processor will help. And there in that DPA, you need to totally clarify, and in black and white it should be mentioned what kind of processing they are using, they are been performing, how they are, what kind of access they will be using, where they are storing the data, is there any destruction certificate which they require, maybe it is just a one time processing, or what from end to end life cycle, and along with the entire data flow there should be the security measures taken in place. So that is how the entire similar thing happened with the cross border data transfer as well.
Thank you so much, Preeti. I'll
Hope I have
move to the
answered your
next
question.
layer. Definitely. Thank you for elaborate
Thank you.
answer.
Thank you. Oh, we have a quiz again. Back to you, Shreya. Yes, Shreya, please. Can you?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
So, question number 2. Why do binding corporate rules prohibit the transfer of employee names to telecom providers within the same country in order to provide them with mobile phone services? Option A. Because BCRs only provide adequate safeguards for organizations who move data outside their corporation. Option B, because BCRs secure transfers to third parties without needing to fulfill additional requirements. Option C, because BCRs only deal with intra organizational transfers and not with transfers to third parties. Option D, because BCRs require contractual arrangements to legitimize international transfers of data. You have 20 seconds. Please answer. Try to answer the questions. Preeti has very widely covered the topic. Time starts now. Time's up. I hope you have answered the right one. Please, Preeti, move ahead with
Sure.
option correct answer and the justification, please.
Sure, definitely. So the correct answer to this question is the option C. As I have discussed just few minutes back, that what are BCRs? BCRs are your binding corporate rules, which does not provide a transfer of an employees to a telecom within the same country. Rather, they are the intra-organizational transfer, not to the third parties at all. I think you can see that somewhere in the Article 4 and 47, and if I'm not wrong, maybe there is a recital 110. So you can see that example, you can see that this is how the BCRs is between the countries, but between the same organization. So answer C is the correct answer here. Okay, we can move to
Yes.
the
Thank you so much,
next
Preeti.
page. Thank you. Okay, this is really interesting topic, which is conducting the risk assessment for transfer. This conducting of the risk assessment for transfer not only helps to identify but to evaluate and even mitigate the potential data protection risk which is associated with transfer of borders. Now, this is also required, one, to demonstrate the accountability and due diligence to ensure that the compliance is there with the data protection rules. Like there are many examples. The first thing is to identify steps which we can cover here is, first is to identify the transfer. What kind of data transfer assessment is required here? What kind of a data it is there? What is, whether the data is sensitive data? What is the transfer? What is the volume? What is the destination country? And then there is another. The next step is to assess the your data protection risk. Various potential risks could be your unauthorized access, your data breach, your loss, data breach losses, your inadequate data protection laws in the recipient or the destination country, your insecure data transfer protocols. So this assessment of risk was also one of the very important steps. The third would be to evaluate the transfer mechanism, assessing the effectiveness of the transfer mechanism, whether it is your SCC, whether it is your BCR. So this assessment is also very important. And then considering the recipient countries data protection landscape. So that is when the previous one, when we spoke about that the educate country, whether it is educate country approved or unapproved country, we have to ensure that the recipient countries or the destination country data protection landscape, their data protection rules, their regulations, how their enforcement practices are happening, how the judicial redressal mechanism is there, then identifying what could be the mitigation measures. Like, for example, for the previous risk which we have identified, whether we have to put across encryption, whether there's an additional contractual safeguard which needs to be there, whether we require to put across enhanced security controls, any pseudonymization, what kind of a mitigation measures we need to take place here. The last but very important part is your documenting and reviewing. So, documenting the risk assessment, findings, and mitigation, and the regularly reviewing that and updating to ensure that there is an ongoing compliance. So, once we are reviewing that, we are also need to put across any such new potential risk, which may be any kind of AI driven risk. Maybe it could be any sort of additional risk which we have not taken in the previous assessment, needs to be also updated. So this is how the risk assessment or the risk transference is required. We also called as, in other words, yes, somewhere it is called as a DPIA, somewhere it is also called as a TIA, which is your transfer impact assessment. Any questions you have, Shreya, on that part?
Yes. So, Preeti, when we talk about risk assessments, suppose there is a company who want to transfer their data to another country, and what the company has found is the transferring is little higher, the risk is at little higher side. But is it dependent on the company to see how much risk are they ready to take, or how does it work? Like, would they be able to transfer the data even if the risk is at higher side, or they have to mitigate only first and then they can?
See, Shreya, one line to this answer could be that no country or no company, sorry, can afford to, you know, share the personal data with higher risk, because end of the day, if any such risks may before even reaching the data, for example, if I'm not using the right protocol to transfer, I may say that what if the data get leaked in between, what if the data get hacked in between, then there is a lot of penalty, then there is again the regulation which is on head. So it is always not advisable, and I'm sure no company would do that. But that is the reason why the transfer impact assessment is really important, to evaluate what kind of risks you were able to foresee. For example, whether it is actually advisable to do such kind of a transfer or not, or is there any possible to, at the end, to understand that if the risk can be reduced or transferred, or how to mitigate those risks. Because without mitigation of these risks, if the risk rating is really very high, it is really not advisable, and I'm sure not even the legal team will also not agree to that, and nobody will agree to that, to do such kind of transfer. So that is the reason why your defining the parameters of your transfer impact assessment is really important. Like, when the transfer is will going to happen, what kind of an assessment it is happening, when it will be ending, what is the frequency, what will happen to the residual risk, what is the probability, what is the target jurisdiction for which the TIA is required, what are the local laws which says, what are the various safeguards with method which we are using. So, is the personal data which is using will be in the clear text, or it will be encrypted manner. So all those questions to assess the risk is really important before it reaches out to the, before even if starts from the sender country to the target country.
I'm sorry to ask this question. You have worked with Meta. So I have recently come across that Irish Data Protection Commission has fined Meta Ireland, that is euro 91 million. So it is like, how many times they have been fined? I'm sure they have good data privacy officers and legal officers, but still they choose to do such activities. They choose to take such risk that may find them. So that is why I asked that question. So if you have
I
any.
do. I do understand Shreya, but whether, yes, I was an ex Meta. Um, this is just a quick, you can say, humble request here. I cannot comment on any company's, working methodologies, but and I'm sure there are many learned professional there, and they are very much quite well aware, well learned, and they are empowered to take those decisions. I may not be the right person as on platform, but I really thank you for this question. That is really took me off guard. So really, thanks for this question. Yeah,
Okay, I'm sorry, Preeti. So we can
not,
move ahead.
not at all. Yes, definitely we can. It's safer to move to the next slide. Okay, documenting your data. Yeah. So just now, before this slide, while I was putting a little stress to document and reviewing the result of a data transfer. So document and review data transfer is, you can do it in the data transfer register. So I am sure a lot of us would be knowing about risk registers which we are using in the enterprise level. It is from the legacies which we use. It is like top-down risk register, your bottom-up risk registers. So similarly, there are the data transfer registers which helps you to ensure the ongoing compliance. And there are many benefits if we do that. For example, it help you to have an enhanced transparency, accountability. So clear record of data transfer will help to the internal tracking, external scrutiny as well. It also help you to have a regulatory compliance. Now, any such documentation is always an added point to demonstrate your adherence to the data protection regulation, whether it is your GDPR, whether it is your DPDP or CPA, any law you require to have those evidences. So such documentation will help you. And then there is a audit and investigation readiness. There are many audits which happen. There could be an external auditor coming in. There could be your internal audit team. So such documentation help them to have a proper investigation, have a proper audit checks and readiness. It also helps you to have an improved data governance. So it promotes the data stewardship. It helps you to ensure the data quality, your security, your integrity, and then thus overall it's a better decision making. So all whenever you start documenting such data transfer, so it helps you to have the informed data management strategies, and it help you to have a better optimization results from the next data transfer. So I think documentation is really important part. So any
I
questions?
really like, yes, no question. I really liked it how you emphasized throughout the webinar how important it is to document each and everything. Whether you are collecting consent, whether you're transferring the data cross border, whether you are assessing the risk, everything should be documented, and it's very important for the organization also, for compliance purpose also.
Absolutely correct, because that is how you're going to prove if any kind of a regulatory audits happen. That is how you're going to demonstrate, even to even to your new customers, maybe companies are new multinational, any sort of a mergers happen. This is how you're going to demonstrate that this is everything is documented, and that helps you to promote the transparency across. And it definitely, to all the stakeholders, it boosts up the confidence, and of course to the consumers on the other hand. So yes, you are right on the spot here. Ongoing monitoring and review. I think that this is the subset of the documentation part. How the documentation helps you now to by integrating ongoing monitoring and review into the data transfer processes is important. So this helps you to safeguard the sensitive data, maintaining the trust which we were talking about among the stakeholders. Now there are many implementation steps which we can put across for the ongoing monitoring. So I'm just taking across ongoing monitoring separately and the review separately. So for example, for ongoing monitoring, we can establish a monitoring framework. We can implement the data transfer tracking. We can put across the real-time alerting. There is a regular security audits which will happen. There could be the vulnerability assessment. There could be the pen testing. There's a continuous risk assessment which happens to update the risk assessment to reflect the changes in the data transfer landscape. So this is the ongoing monitoring. Now, when we say the regular reviews, Regular reviews can be your scheduled periodic review. It could be your quarterly review, it could be your on annual or half yearly reviews of data transfer processes. As it helps you to assess the compliance. The reviews always helps you to verify whether there is a adherence to the data protection regulation and the organization policies. It all helps you to review the data transfer agreement, the review to the recipient compliance, and always document the review finding. So this always help you to have a record of the review outcome and what are the actions taken. So this overall will help you to enhance the maturity of a cross-border data transfer. So, any questions you have, Shreya, or we can move to the next slide because I am little, looking at the time also. I think yeah. So data principle, right? I think this is the crux of the entire data protection laws, whether it is your GDPR, whether it is any Saudi law which have been putting across any our India DPDP Act. This is to, like for example, our DPDP Act, which is Digital Personal Data Protection Act, to empower the individuals like you, like me, to control their personal data. This is the entire focal point of all the data protection rights. Now, these rights aim to establish a robust data protection framework, prioritizing the individual's autonomy to take a decision, data sovereignty in the digital landscape. Now, like for example, our we have a right like right to consent, we have a right to access. Under DPDP Act, we have right to correct, right to erase, right to nominate, and right to grievance redressal. Now, a quick, I can just take one or two lines on that. Right to consent, as we all know, that we as a data principal have a right to give a consent and even to withdraw the consent for the processing of any personal data which we have given to. Now, right to access is right now, as of now, we would not be knowing that how many of our personal data has been floating around to which companies. So we should have a right to access the information about our personal data. It helps to us to have a transparent and we can be more aware. Right to correct sense. It's a very simple thing. Uh, Data principles, for example, if my address or maybe any of my personal data has been changed, now the companies or the organization should have a mechanism to correct and to rectify the personal data so that the accuracy can be maintained. And similarly, right to eraser. Um, Maybe any processing of my personal data has been completed with one of the companies and I wanted to exercise that right. So individuals should have a right to delete any unnecessary processing of a data so that I can protect my privacy. Similarly, right to nominate. Data principals can nominate any other individuals in the case of a death or incapacity. So rights to grievance redressal. So any of us, we have a right to come file the complaint. We have a right to seek the resolution for the data protection concerns. Now, in order to exercise any of these discussed right, the organization should be well equipped on how to respond, how to act on these kind of rights. The teams must be well informed, they should be trained, they should be equipped to handle such requests, and even there should be a escalation matrix which should be well designed to avoid any leniencies and to trigger the alarm also in case there is any assistance required for handling any tricky request. So there could be an involvement of the legal team, there could be involvement of the compliance team. Maybe there could be a tricky situation where you require. So such practices should be there in an organization. Any questions you have, Shreya? We can move to the next slide.
Yes. Yeah, sure.
That's an interesting one. So, breach response and incident management. I think even if there is a cross-border data flow or there is a processing of a personal data within an organization, effective breach response and incident management is really crucial for mitigating any sort of a processing or data transfer risk. Hence, it is imperative to integrate the cross-border data transfer into the breach agreement or breach management. Sorry, I wrongly said agreement. It is breach management. Along with there should be a established clear plan. There should be defined roles and responsibility. There should be the defined procedures to be undertaken in the event of breach. So, for any efficient breach response, the organization management must detect and respond quickly should be notifying to the stakeholders. Now, stakeholders could be your definitely your regulatory authorities are there, and could be your impacted or affected data subjects or data principals, would be your business partners. So, conducting the incident assessment should be important. Determine the breach impact, the scope, the root cause, the RCA, the root cause analysis. That is also important. Implement the containment measure. Any such unauthorized data access, any such transfer of the access should be immediately stopped, notifying the regulatory authority. I think this is also mentioned with GDPR, it is within 72 hours of deadline. And so, some kind of a notification to the authorities is really important to provide to them, providing the support. Now, for example, if there is any kind of a breach which happened, and there are the certain set of the data subjects or data principal which are impacted, so there should be some immediate offer, assistance should be offered to them, so that this is a part of your post incident activity, reviewing your incidents, updating your policy, enhancing your security. So these kind of activities is really really important, so that it could be the breach may be completed and handled in a very rightful manner. Shreya, do you have any questions in this?
Yes, Preeti. So, what do you think? What are the challenges, most common challenges you have seen in the organization when it comes to breach response and incident management?
I think mostly there are a lot of procedures in place, but how efficient those procedures are, that is something which needs to be, there should be some kind of a tabletop exercise. I'm like, for example, that let's create a scenario. It could be say like 6 monthly activities or something like that, where everybody should, so that even in the event of breach, the entire team automatically comes across in the red alert manner, and they know what has to be done. So, for example, if there is a company which have all the procedures done and there are no breach happened, maybe past, and it's a good thing if it doesn't happen for many years or decade. Maybe it is procedural, they are very much well equipped, but they have not practically done any sort of a practice. So I think there should be some tabletop exercise, so that the immediate actions which they have to be put across, that should be done. For example, containment of a breach, immediately isolate the systems, prevent the further data loss, notification to incident, immediate notification to the incident response team, management, relevant authorities. So all such activities, and that is the biggest challenge here which I have seen, that theoretically the companies are well equipped, the procedures are bang on their places, but practically they have never practiced, due to which when such event happen, they at times they fail to comply with their own procedures because they have not done any such tabletop exercises.
I completely agree. Only example I can think of is in the US. I have seen they have dummy alarm. So when the alarm rings, a fire alarm, so everybody has to come down, evacuate the building, and all these things. So it is exactly the same scenario.
Exactly. I think we also have all the companies. It is a mandatory to have such drill activities, even the fire alarm activities. So all these cyber drills which they do. So similarly, along with the cyber drill, there should be the breach kind of a breach response, or
Right.
the incident drill which is taken into consideration. So that will definitely help to enhance the maturity.
Yeah.
Rightly said, Shreya.
Perfect. I'll change the slide.
Sure. All right. Over to you, Shreya.
Thank you so much. This is our last question. I hope everybody will be able to answer the right answer. Question number three: if a third country data controller or processor does not wish to comply with the supervisory authority decision, then under the GDPR, the supervisory authority has the power, option A, to waive its decision as its powers are limited to the EU and its member states. Option B, to carry out its actions outside the EU without the target country's consent. Option C, to force the data controller or processor to relocate to an EU member state. Option D, to order the suspension of data flows to a recipient in the third country. Your time starts now, 20 seconds. Time's up.
Okay. All
Preeti,
right.
over to you.
So, yes, thank you, Shreya. So, the correct answer to this question is, so the question says, if a third country data controller, there is a third country data controller, not the educate country, there's a third country which do not wish to comply. Basically means the destination country do not want it to comply with the supervisory authority decision. Supervisory authority is your data protection board, those regulators. Then under GDPR, supervisory authority. So for it's a very simple thing that if you will not agree to the supervisory authority decision, then option D can happen, which is to suspend the flow of data flow to a recipient country in the third country. So I think it is covering under the GDPR Article 58 points to each supervisory authority have the power to order the suspension of data flow to a recipient in the third country or any international organization. So we have to listen to the regulators then. That's the gist of this question.
Right. Moving to next slide.
Yes, please. All right, internal audits and reporting. Um, as we were discussing right now also that the regular internal audits reporting, it always ensure to have a cross-border data transfer compliance and effectiveness. For example, a quick thing, how the internal audit helps, it helps you to assess the data transfer policies, the data transfer processes. It helps to evaluate the compliance with your regulations. So whatever the regulations you have to be compliant to, whether it is your GDPR, CPRA, CCPA, or DPDPA, internal audit helps you to evaluate that compliance level. It helps to identify the vulnerability and the risk, and to verify whether the data protection controls are implemented are actually adequate enough for this particular data transfer flow. Reporting, as as Shreya also rightly said, that I keep on emphasizing that the documenting those audit finding and recommendation is something which happens under the reporting, informing the stakeholders, whether it is your management, your board, your regulators, publishing the annual data transfer report to the senior management regulatory authority. It helps you to provide a transparency of data handling practices. So for it is very important for any organization to define your audit scope, your frequency, your risk management methodology, your KPI for compliance monitoring, your issue tracking, your remediation mechanism, your even your audit committee for the entire oversight. So this internal audit and reporting is a total different ecosystem, but it always help you to ensure that any cross-border data transfer is with compliance to the effective or the relevant and prevalent law which for which you need to adhere to. We can move to the next slide, Shreya. Thank you. So, as we discussed in the previous slide, the teams need to be trained, well equipped on the obtaining the methodologies of consent, on understanding the value and security of personal data and personal even the data protection policies. The team or the employee who are handling, they must be aware on adopting the secure data transfer practices, like they have to implement encryption, they have to secure the file sharing, they have to be, and there should be a proper authentication which is required. So employee must be trained on how to, and I think this is also very important that even from the organization level, that all the employees should be aware, there should be a training or there should be a regular training coming across on how to identify the data breach and where they have to report it. So if in case any such data breach happened, they should be able to report it, and they are very much well equipped to know that this is how what is the next step they have to do. So employee training and awareness helps in reducing, as we all know, it helps in reducing any human error induced breaches. It helps your data, enhance your data security. It fosters, I think it is very important to foster the compliance culture and to demonstrate the regulatory adherence as well. We can quickly go to the next slide. I believe there's a, I know the time is actually ticking. Yeah, conclusion and the, I think we are right on time. Conclusion and the future outlook. I believe this is a time to wrap up on what we all have discussed here. As the technology advances and as the global data flow continue to rise, organizations across the globe must have to stay agile, must be adaptable to navigate the complex landscape of the cross-border data flow, ensure they are secure, ensure they are compliant, and there is a trustworthy exchange of data. So there is definitely need of an hour to encompass various measures in the organization dynamics, like especially for from the future perspective, which could be your cloud-based data transfer solution, blockchain-enabled data secure sharing, your quantum computing resistant encryption, your zero trust architectural adoption, your AI-driven data protection solution, and many such future-oriented solutions should be taken into consideration. So that's it from my end. Shreya, do you wanted to add some points here?
So basically, you used the very right word. I was very happy when you said that, the word trust. So when you talk about anything personal, it's personal data, your personal belongings, your personal people. So you need to have trust when it is being transferred to somebody else, right? So yeah, wanted to have some emotional connection to it.
Definitely, Shreya. So whenever we are sharing our personal data, there's always a connect to it, and I think unless and until we are trusting to the organization, we are trusting to where they are, what kind of data they are doing, whether they are profiling my data or not. So that trust factor goes to the detail what exactly they are doing to our data. So I think it is a high time that the organization need to demonstrate that trust, that the trust of their consumers, the trust of their data principals, and the trust which they are putting across to all the other vendors or the third parties or the other different countries. So it was really thank you for for the Ministry of Security here, and once again my humble thanks to everybody. Thanks to you, Shreya, the lovely professionals, everybody who has been there in the part of this session. Kushi, thank you so much for having me here on this platform. Over to you, Kushi, if you wanted to add something here.
Uh, 1 second. So thank you so much, Preeti.
Oh,
Thank you so much for amazing conversation. Thank you for telling us the complexities of the cross-border data transfer, how we can come out of it, what are the mitigation measures, how we assess the risk, and everything. I hope audience felt the same. It was very knowledgeable session. Thank you so much, Khushi, for entire support throughout the session. Uh, Thank you everyone for this for joining this webinar. If you need more such guidance on CIPPE, DPDP Act, any compliance issue, please reach out to us. Khushi will share the link if you want to know more about it, how you can connect with us. Over to you, Khushi.
Sure, thanks a lot. So, a heartfelt thanks to everyone who has made this webinar successful today, and special thanks to you, Preeti and Shreya, for delivering such an insightful and engaging session. So, we are also incredibly grateful to the audience for being here throughout the session, and I hope you found the webinar informative and inspiring. So, if you have any further questions, feel free to directly reach out to us. And as Shreya mentioned, if you have any queries related to DPDP Act or CIPP, the form is there in the comment section. You can fill this out. And thank you once again for your time and participation.
thank you, everyone. Have a nice weekend and enjoy. Let's have a dinner together. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks a
Thank you.
lot.
Thank you. Bye bye.